Good evening. We'll give it a couple of minutes. We're still slightly ahead of time. Not something Harvest Folk are necessarily used to, at least not from me. But yeah, I just want to make sure everybody can get online before we start the stream. Hope you had a good week. My owl's out again. Sitting on the post. I don't know if you seen the photos that went up on the Facebook page. But around about this time every night, we have a barn owl that comes and hunts our garden. And he's sat looking at me and I'm looking at him. Oh. Right, well, let's make a start, I think. I hope you've had an exciting Easter weekend. We prefer to really refer to it as the celebration of resurrection. Easter is bound up in all sorts of other traditions, but for us, it's that time of year when we remember and celebrate the success, the effect of the sacrifice and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I know in some traditions, people like to kind of reenact the process. I'm not sure I could even begin to comprehend the grief or the sorrow of the disciples on Good Friday. But also I've read the end of the story. And so this whole weekend, we've been celebrating the fact that what Jesus did for us, what he declared for us when he said, Father, forgive them, the way that he made for us when he made that extraordinary statement at the cross, Father, into your hands, I place my spirit. God surrendering himself into the care of God, an extraordinary thing. And for us now, that is a possibility. So we've had a great weekend. I really hope that you have as well, as you've been celebrating those things. But while I've been going through the weekend, I kept coming back, and folks who joined us for the Skype session on Friday, I keep coming back to the experience of the person we only know as the thief on the cross. And it's an extraordinary experience because for him, redemption was immediate. He was there when it happened. And so when Jesus makes that statement that we looked at on Friday night, this day you will be with me in paradise, he has no wait. He has his first encounter with Christ there at the moment of his ultimate earthly end. And yet, because he says, remember me when you come into your kingdom, Jesus responds to that faith and says, okay, today you'll be with me in paradise. He gets that experience. And that got me thinking, at the moment, lots of people are talking about the way in which they're waiting. We would all like to be like that thief on the cross. We would love to have that imminency of the promise. We would like to know that in the moment that we receive the promise, that it's imminent and it's immediate. And depending on which government you listen to, or scientist, or news media, and everybody's got an opinion about it, we're all in a state at the moment of waiting. There are things that are being delayed. I was reading this week about people who've got weddings delayed. All the disappointment and the stress, and then the anticipation of what will come, and so many other things happening. The thief had an instant experience, an immediate stepping from this life into the fullness of the promises of God in glory. But by contrast, for many others who had put their faith in what God was going to do in Jesus Christ, it had been a much, much longer time coming. Hebrews 11, we're going to read just a little passage from Hebrews 11, 13 to 16, and then we'll pick it up a little bit later on. But this is what Hebrews 11:13 to 16 says. It says, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have found a way to get back there. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. What an incredible state to be in, to have lived your whole life anticipating the promise of the Redeemer who was to come, anticipating that Messiah was coming, anticipating that you didn't belong to this world, but that rather you belonged to a future homeland, a homeland that was not of this earth. I always love that picture of Abraham, a man who famously with his family had built cities, but refused to dwell in them, preferring instead to dwell in tents as a declaration, even though he was living in a physical land that was his, that he was waiting for a heavenly city, a city whose maker and creator was God. And so for the whole of his life, he lived that way. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right on through the history of God's people, they lived with this expectation that there was this promised Messiah. There was one who was going to come, God who would bring the kingdom of God. And that's, of course, what Jesus declares. He declares the kingdom come. And that's a wonderful thing. But they lived their whole lives. And in Hebrews 11, we read the most challenging of phrases, these all died in faith. They believed it. They believed it. They lived in faith. They had a great relationship with God, and yet they did not receive the promises in their however many years that they had. Can you imagine then their excitement when on the same day in which the thief for the first time encounters Christ, takes him at his word, asks to be remembered and to be welcomed into the kingdom, and receives that very day, this day you will be with me in paradise? Can you imagine the excitement of those who had died in faith, not receiving the promises, but seeing them from afar off, when suddenly into their sleep, it's hard for us to comprehend really what it must have been like. But in that state of waiting, frozen really between time and eternity, suddenly Jesus, the one for whom they waited, Messiah, Redeemer, the King of Kings, the one who not only embodies but brings the kingdom, breaks in to their situation, and they receive the fullness that they had lived for. You know, it's easy sometimes to believe God's promises for someone else. If you read on in Hebrews 11, you read on verses 17 through 19, the writer picks up Abraham's position. It says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he would receive the promises, offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called, concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead. You know, I can't imagine what Abraham went through, nor indeed Isaac. Isaac was not a small child when this took place. He was a grown man. But they made this decision that it was better to trust God and to serve God and believe that God could raise the dead. Well, that's very easy for Abraham. Easy when it applies to Isaac. And Isaac is saying, it's okay, Dad, I believe God. It's okay, Dad, I believe God. But Abraham has to now believe it for himself. In fact, his faith has to continue through the grave, having lived his whole life in tents, never once having chosen to settle in one of the cities that his family had built, never once deciding that he was going to use his vast wealth to fortify his position. Abraham reaches the end of his natural walk, and he still believes. You know, as we've been praying these last few weeks for the situation in the world around us and for people that we know who are going through things, I often find that it's easier to pray with great courage and boldness when it's someone else who's on the sharp end of the knife, when it's someone else's dream that is at stake, when it's somebody else's health or somebody else's situation. But what about my Isaac? What about the promises that God has given me? What about my own life? For me, do I really believe in the God who raises the dead? Abraham clearly did. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Habakkuk, the prophet, gives us this in Habakkuk 2, verses 2 and 3. Write the vision, make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. I believe that God has made everything perfect in its time. That includes his promises to you. That includes his purposes for you. That includes the dreams and the visions that he has laid up in your life, the things that he has given to you that are going to be of great joy to you, the things that are your Isaacs, the things that are your own, even more immediate, even more personal, things that are inextricably a part of who you are. Every purpose he fulfills. Every promise is yes and amen. And for literally thousands upon thousands of faithful followers who had died in faith, not having received the promise. When Jesus says to the thief this day, those words echo down through the thousands of years that had passed. And on that day, as he broke into paradise, as he broke through the darkness of their sleep, as he broke into that place of safety, but a place where they were still subject to the constraint of their physical death, and the Messiah that they'd been promised, and the purpose of God that they had waited for, and the certainty with which they had lived and died that God could raise the dead was fulfilled. I don't know when those moments will come for you and for I, but I'm absolutely sure that no matter what happens in the intervening days and weeks and months and years, no matter how long the wait seems, no matter how tough the things that come against us, no matter how final any changes in our circumstances might be, the thing that I am certain of is that for those who belong to Jesus, those who trust him, those who live in dependency, that's all faith is, who live in dependency upon his promise, not even death, not even thousands of years, not even having not fully grasped or understood, not all the things that life and time and decay can do to us, not anything can prevent the perfect fulfillment of everything God has promised you. You might feel sometimes like you've been in a much longer wait, caught in a much greater delay than just these few months where we're under lockdown. But every promise and every purpose he will perfectly fulfill. That's our thought for this evening. I hope you have a lovely week. I hope you're keeping well and safe. I say it every week. If you want to join with us for one of our Skype sessions, we gather on Skype. You can find all the details on our social media at facebook.com/Street Harvest. And we gather at 8 p.m. On Wednesday evening and at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings, UK time. We would love you to be a part of that. I probably have to say you don't have to join Skype to connect to the meeting. You can do it through a browser. But we would love you to be there. And whatever else you're doing this week, the Lord bless you, and live day by day in the fullness of his resurrection. God bless.